How's it going, everyone? Today we are joined by the impressive and incredible Robert Clotworthy. And if you guys are fans of television and binge watching, like I am, I'm sure you've heard his voice on the Curse of Oak Island television show and Ancient Aliens, and also his work in the video game series Starcraft, playing Jim Raynor, which is, if you're into video games, is probably a top five, top 10 character hero in the video game series. And he's also a practitioner of the martial art Kung Fu San Soo, which is very interesting. So glad to have you on here, Robert.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, John.
So with COVID and everything going on the last year, your industry, while affected obviously with filming, you're able to still kind of be in your own little studio doing your work, right?
Yeah, and I'm one of the fortunate few that I actually was, I guess, exposed at some point, had absolutely no symptoms, and have the antibodies. I don't know how that happened. I didn't even get a pimple, but when I went to have a blood test, I found out I had the antibodies, so I feel comfortable going into the studio. So it allowed me to not just only do stuff from my home studio, and we were doing that remotely, but actually go into the studio. So as far as voiceover is concerned, fortunately, it's one area of the business, especially the area that I do with narration, that really hasn't been too adversely affected. We were a bit anxious as far as Oak Island was concerned, because the guys normally would go up there in March or April, and it was delayed, and they finally got up there. So we were worried as to whether there was even going to be a season 8 at this point, but they made it up, and the show is terrific this season, I think.
And we'll talk about that, but congrats on the ratings that show has been pulling in, especially how long it's been on TV has been incredible. And it's
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Last week, I mean, there's a show on tonight. This is Tuesday, but last week's episode was the highest rated of the entire season. We had over 3.1 million people tuning in. We broke the 3 million barrier. We were at about 2.8, 2.9 the last 6 or 7 weeks, and this last episode we cracked the 3 million. So it's obviously striking a nerve with people. People are enjoying it.
there's something very therapeutic with that show that you want so much goodwill to come for Marty and Rick and the team. And it's amazing how it started off as this, what's Oak Island, and now it feels like for me myself personally that I'm part of like helping these guys because I get so like anxious and I'm like, how many more? Did they find this the first week and then realize that this show is so good that we have to draw this out 10 years? Like it's gotta be for you. How invested are you in this outside the fact that obviously you work for them, you do the narration and stuff like that?
It's interesting because the producers of that show are the same producers that do Ancient Aliens, and I've been working with this team for goodness, I think it's been about 16 years now, which is amazing for an actor to have one employer for that period of time consistently. And one of the wonderful things about the creative producers of this show is they were able to target and find a story that they felt would be very interesting to the people. And when they heard about these guys who were up there at Oak Island, and they were doing this prior to
Right.
History Channel coming up and filming what they were doing. This was generally their passion, and I think the guys have a very interesting relationship. They're brothers. They're the interplay between them is very fascinating. They've got a great team of very, very interesting people that are up there helping them, and they're really trying to do it. This is not a show where we're tossing a few coins into the money pit, and then they find it and it's like, oh wow, look what we found. No, this is completely legitimate. Um, the two brothers were, especially Marty, were pretty well off uh,
Right.
beforehand, so they really didn't need this to pay the rent. And I think it's fascinating because it's a show that everybody can watch. There's nothing that's going to be offensive to anyone that's going to be on this show. So you can have your 6-year-old watch the show with you along with grandpa, and you're going to find something interesting when we discuss something that is of historical significance, like a specific date of when, XYZ may have happened, and we tell that story, that's all true. So there is an element of education that comes with it. And also I think it keys into uh, something that all of us as humans are interested in. We've all, even as kids, looked for treasure, even if it's in the
Right.
yard or gone down the street, and it's fascinating to search for that. So it taps into that, and then these guys take it to a level where basically money is, I don't want to say it's no object, because they do set a budget, but they have a lot of money to spend to search. And so it's fascinating to see what they do, who they bring in. Uh, I think last season I was reading uh, one of the scripts, and and it was talking about some machine, some specially designed machine that came from Korea to do some kind of exploratory borehole. And I was thinking, wait a minute, this is like a one of a kind machine. It's coming from Korea. How far in advance do you have to order this thing? Because it's not cheap. And then how does it get there? Do they take
Right.
the ship to, the west coast of Canada and then drive it all the way across? Is it going through the Panama Canal? It's so when you think about the logistics of everything that's involved, it's pretty fascinating. Then you actually see them do it. It's pretty much real time. And it's a pretty good metaphor for what life is, because if you're looking for that end result, if you're looking for your keys, you stop searching when you find them. But this is the kind of thing where, will it end? When will it end? When will they find the treasure? Who knows? You
Right.
find out when you find it, if you find it. But in the
You
meantime,
said it
you don't give up.
right. You said it best. And I don't watch a lot of television, and so for me to get drawn to the show, it's like you talked about it. If I want to learn about the Knights of Templar or a certain event or a shipwreck, I'm going on the phone later that night on the
Yeah,
computer and be like, let's research this. The fact that the show is, it kind of builds up that adventurous, wonderful spirit of exploration
yeah,
and the learning.
yeah.
And that's so fascinating about that show.
Yeah, and it also, there's a lot of disappointment in the show, and so you see
That's life.
how they deal with it, how they overcome that, how they budget, how they plan. Somebody may have an idea, and that person is outvoted. They do something else. So I think it's really fascinating for young people to see how people get together to solve a problem, how they work together. So it's also educational in that way. And I've had uh, parents who have written to me or written into the show, and they comment how helpful it is with their kids, because they watch it, they see the issues that develop, they see how they deal with it, they learn some history, the kids can do some research about it, and also, for boys, there was
Right.
they used to sell like just a video for like a little boy, and all it was just a construction site. It was just a camera set up outside a construction site, and you would see trucks going in and people unloading stuff and a crane, and nothing was happening other than they're just building something. But little boys would sit there and just stare at it and be fascinated. So you also have that element of seeing these crazy machines go in there and dig, and they blow things up, and they have sonar. So it's all this fascinating stuff that guys get into wetsuits and go down into these things, so it's dangerous. So it's got a lot of elements, and it's all real. It's real.
For a show like that, since it's very all tied in based on the seasons and stories continue on and stuff, are you given? They film it once, and you're given a script. Is there like a writer that helps you write this, or if there is there ever stuff that you come across you're like, well, my character as you wouldn't say it this way based on what I said before? Like, how much control do you have over what is being actually aired through the narration?
Yeah, I don't want to say that it's a completely collaborative process with me, but I call myself the last line of defense, because
Okay.
if I say it, it's going out there, and it can end up in the show. So the way the show works is the guys go up. Let's say they normally go up in April, and they're there through November, because after November, it's too cold to do anything there. So they basically have 6 or 7 months that they can go up there and do whatever it is their work. Of course, they plan ahead of time as to what that next season is going to be, what kind of work they're going to do, what their basic plan is. Then we send up a film crew with them, and we just film whatever it is they're doing. And based on what they find or don't find or events that happen, they start piecing together a show that makes some kind of narrative sense. In other words, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end for each episode. We have to have, some drama in there. We have to kind of highlight, uh, you know, uh, things that might be a little bit more dramatic. You try to make it kind of a little bit more interesting, and from that, then they write a narrative script that has to do with that particular episode. Now, sometimes they may find something. Let's say, for example, and they say, okay, let's move this up in the in the chain of the episodes we're going to do. Or they may say, let's delay this a little bit just so we can kind of make sure we create a narrative that kind of leads up to this. But and then when I get the script that day. I show up at the studio that morning. They hand it to me and they say, okay, here's Oak Island, eighth season, episode 11. And I don't read through the thing. We just basically start. I go to where my first line of dialogue would be. I'll read it, out loud to make sure it makes sense to me. Sometimes we'll find some grammatical errors. Sometimes we'll find, maybe part of the story doesn't make sense to me. And I'll say, I don't really understand what's happening here. Can you kind of explain this to me? And then we might rewrite it a little bit to make it a little bit more, a little bit more clear. And I'll basically do it twice. And if everything's okay, they'll take one of those as the take, and we move on to the next one. If not, then we go back and we do it again until everybody's happy.
So when you kind of start doing this type of work, I know you started as a teenager with your father and stuff. Were there voice actors growing up that kind of resonated with you? They're kind of like, man, like, this is really cool. But at what point did you realize you have that voice?
Well, as a kid, you're not thinking that far ahead.
Right.
My father was a producer of radio commercials. So every once in a while he would invite me into the studio, and I would go down as a young kid and watch these voice actors doing whatever the heck it is that they were doing for that particular commercial. And as luck would have it, a lot of the voices that were the cartoon characters that I was watching on television were the people that were coming in. And I would get to meet them, and I'd see how they would react. And I was always amazed at what they could do. And so as a kid, one of the things that I just naturally found interesting was that I would read out loud. I mean, some people may, go in the backyard and shoot hoops for an hour. I would read out loud. I like telling the story, and I would challenge myself to see if I could read the story, have it make sense without knowing where it was going. So I've said before, it's almost like you're a lizard where one eye is here, the other eye is there. So you don't know whether the sentence has an exclamation point at the end, whether it has a question mark at the end. You don't know where you're going with it. So I would challenge myself to see if I could kind of figure it out as I was going along. And then that turned into where I had a friend of mine who lived down the street, and he of course was lucky enough to have an actual 4-track tape recorder, and reel to reel, and
right.
we would write little stories, almost like a play or something, and have characters. And I remember we used to do on Halloween, we would turn his house into kind of a Halloween experience where people could go in from room to room, and we would have different speakers set up in different rooms, and we would have something recorded. And, I would do some stuff, he would do some stuff. And it started out as just being fun. I think that's critical to be passionate about something, because if you have fun with it, then once you have fun, that will give you the base to where when you really want to learn how to do it well. And that will be challenging. That's not always easy. It's not always a simple thing. But if you have that love for it, then that will sustain you through the periods of where it's challenging. They say that if, for example, if a kid wants to play tennis, little kid picks up a tennis racket, don't teach them anything. Just let them take the racket, let them smack it, let them hit a ball. Doesn't matter what they do. Let them just have fun. Eventually, they'll come up to you and they'll say, "How do you hit that ball?" And you go, "Oh, you just do this." Let it go. Let them develop the love for it. Let them have some fun. Then when they want to get serious, then they'll be able to. So with the question of when did I know that I had that voice, I don't know. I just was always having fun and enjoying it and exploring it and going further and further and further with it and challenging myself. And eventually it's started to pay off where people kept. But
Growing,
I'm having as much fun now as I was when I was 6 years old doing that stuff. That's what's great about it.
I love it. Growing up, I remember the show Unsolved Mysteries and Robert Stack and the narration, and I love the court cases and the background story was just secondary because I was so fascinated by Robert's ability to just narrate. I felt that made the show.
Yeah.
And it's kind of missing in the current rendition of it, because obviously you can't replace Stack. But even now, Forensic Files, a show like that, where you have the stuff, the story in the background, but the narration really sets the pacing and it really draws you in.
Yeah.
And I'm always amazed at the fact that, yeah, you watch Oak Island, but do I care if Rick and Marty finally eat trash? I wish they found all of it.
Yeah.
But I also am so drawn in by your voice, and then with Ancient Aliens, some of that stuff, I'm like, what the hell are they talking about? But your voice almost acts as like the balance between the crazy scientific stuff that might be over someone's head to the everyday person like myself, that you're going to take us on this journey for 60 minutes from beginning to end. And it's just amazing the importance of narration.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I had in voiceover, we have what they call vocal signatures, where if an agent were to describe who you are, what you sound like to someone who doesn't know you, they'd say, "Oh, he's he's funny, he's acerbic, he's kind of wry, he's dumb as a box of doorknobs," whatever it might be. I mean, if you hear somebody tells you that, you go, "Oh, okay, I know what that sounds like." For the vocal signature that I received, and I thought it was brilliant, was from a casting director. She called it approachable intelligence. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm intelligent. It just that means when you listen to me, it sounds like I know what I'm talking about. And along with that, it's not off-putting. It's not like I'm a professor trying to tell you something. I'm allowing you in. I'm sharing this with you. I'm sharing some information that I have. And knowing that and knowing that is my vocal signature, that's kind of the way that I approach these shows. Is I don't want to be off-putting. I want to be inclusive. Come with me on this. It's not going to be scary. There might be some spooky stuff, but we're going to get through it. I promise you.
Right.
Aliens. We're going to kind of get through this. So, but you're so correct with the power of narration. Part of it is because when you hear the voice, it gets into your brain. As the listener, you fill in the blanks. Sometimes now that you see what I look like, it may be tough to listen to the show the same way, because now you see what I look like in your mind. If you're only hearing my voice, you can imagine anything, and there's not this disconnect. I mean, how often do you hear a singer, let's say a singer, and you just love that person's voice, and the first time you see him, you go, "God, he is butt ugly. Oh my," whatever it might be.
Right.
It's like it's difficult to get past that again. So there's a unique power to voice and to narration, and as I like to say, I have a face made for voiceover.
Wow. So when you're voicing over, say, Ancient Aliens,
Uh-huh.
are you Robert Clotworthy, the person doing the narration, or is Robert Clotworthy become a character for that specific narration?
Well, one thing you need to always focus on if you're a voiceover person is you want to be able to convey the truth, because
Right.
microphone, as we call it, is a great bullshit detector. People listening, they can tell whether you're not telling the truth, whether you're lying or not. So as an actor, when I approach the voiceover, I try to be true to myself, and I try to convey my attitude, my opinion about certain things in the show. If that's one of the reasons why I don't want the script in advance. So if there's something, let's say, for example, in an episode of Ancient Aliens, I'm not saying this is
Right.
a spoiler alert or anything, but let's say, um, we now have definitive proof that aliens exist. And here is the photo, and here's the video of an alien talking to us. Now, that would be pretty amazing. That would
Yes.
that would be pretty life altering. Uh, so, and as a viewer, as if I'm getting this information, it's going to be pretty amazing to me. And so, my gut feeling is one of amazement. So, I hopefully will convey that attitude. Or it may be, let's say it was a different narrator, and I go, "This is bullshit. This is a load of this is just crap." Then if I go with that, then you're going to hear that I think that this is nonsense, but it's still going to come across as truthful because it is. So that's the one thing that I try to do is I have a natural enthusiasm for the show. I'm intrigued and interested in the information. I'm curious as to what's going to happen out there, and also I stay true to the producer's view, which is one of being an agnostic but open to the information. One of the wonderful things about Ancient Aliens is we don't say this is how it is. We say this is what people have thought it is in the past. You make the decision. The Egyptians said this, the Incas said that, the Mayans said this. This is part of their religion, part of their stories. This is what Native Americans said. What do you think? Does this all fit in? This is a possibility. And that's why we always say, is it possible? Could it be? And we're asking you that question. What do you think? So
Right.
that's part of the brilliance of the show and why I think it works so much.
Now, I know guitar players that will get their hands insured, or soccer players will get their feet and different stuff. So for you,
Yeah.
obviously we all use our voices and stuff, but is there something extra you have to do for you? And then what is your daily routine to kind of maintain that voice? Like obviously, like you must have different eating, drinking. If you smoke, habits, like, there must be stuff like that where you have to maintain a
Yeah.
flat line, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I'm always aware of it. I'm fortunately, knock on wood, I'm a pretty naturally healthy person anyway, and I don't do a lot of stuff that's going to damage it. I'm not a smoker. I'm not a heavy drinker. I eat pretty healthy. Uh, but there's and I certainly try to avoid yelling, screaming. Is if you're at a concert, for example, it seems like the biggest strain to the voice, or even at a going out to dinner, is if you're
Yep.
trying to raise your voice so you can be heard at the table over the noise that's in a restaurant. That seems to me what strains my voice more than anything. I'm pretty good about being able to give you some pretty powerful yells if need be, but I try to avoid that and try to just stay somewhat chill. I don't have insurance on my voice. I probably should, but yeah, no, you drink a lot. I drink a lot of water. That's one of the things that you have to stay hydrated. If you're going into a studio, you're not going to drink a big glass of milk or eat a bunch of crackers before you go in there. That would be a mistake.
Right.
Yeah, I've also found, here's a funny aside, is when I go into the studio, they usually provide lunch for us. So if we're splitting the session up, morning and an afternoon, and we have lunch in between. If they serve me fish, I'm screwed because my stomach just starts making all kinds of noises.
Right.
It's just weird. It's just weird.
So it's fascinating. So let's kind of talk about the fitness aspect. And
Yeah.
so in March, I started this podcast, and I reached out to a bunch of martial artists. And one of the people I've got to really respect and become friends with is Kathy Long. Well, she is a grandmaster in Kung Fu San Soo,
She
world
is.
champion kickboxer, just one probably the top female fighter of all time, or at least in that discussion, fighter in general. And when I'm doing research on you, when I reach out to you, because obviously from the TV show and stuff, I see the Kung Fu San Soo. I'm like, one, I don't hear this a lot. And now I'm really interested because I don't picture the guy that does these voices into martial arts, but there must be a connection where the mind, body, and does that type of training in martial art help you with, say, Jim Raynor from Starcraft, or a certain person you're trying to emulate if you're doing a video game or something like that?
It actually it was a very, very important part of my life. I did it for a lot of years, for goodness, I want to say close to 20 years, and
Incredible.
I even taught it the last few years. Um, and it was something that always interested me. As a kid, uh, I was not a big kid. I was kind of a slender kid. So, and there were a lot of people that were a lot bigger than me, and I didn't like the idea of being physically intimidated. So I wanted to learn how to take care of myself. And at the same time, that was when the old David Carradine show Kung Fu was coming out,
Yep.
and you had Bruce Lee in the Green Hornet. So Eastern martial arts were just starting to become popular, and I thought it was fascinating. And at I belonged to this gym in West Hollywood at the time. It was the old Beverly Hills Health Club. It was really kind of funny because it had been there for forever, and they actually had a nap room. All these old men would go into this room, and it was really dark, and they had these big loungers, and they would just fall asleep. So it was like this really old gym. But one thing they offered, and they just started, was a kung fu class. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll do this. Let's give this a shot. And I feel so lucky that I fell into Kung Fu San Soo, because at the time it was fairly new in the U.S. The fellow who was I guess the grandmaster, was a fellow named Jimmy H. Wu, whose great uncle, was actually a monk at a monastery in China. And when he left the monastery, he actually took with him two of their books. One of the books was about fighting techniques, and the other one was about philosophy. And these books were, I mean, like this thick. I mean, it wasn't like a small book. It wasn't like a leaflet. And what Jimmy would do, and he was the first one to teach this art outside of his own family. So he was actually teaching it to Occidentals, to the average person. And his studio was in El Monte, and my instructor was one of his students, one of his top students. And every day we would go into class, we would get a new lesson of fighting techniques, and no two were alike. And so what was interesting to me, and also I like to refer to it as it was like Chinese street fighting, because there were no rules associated with this. This was, if you want to put your thumb through somebody's eye, there's a technique. Breaking bones, not a problem. I mean, all hitting, kicking, wherever you want, it's wide open. It also wasn't limited to just punches and leverages. It was punches and leverages and kicks and throws and you name it. It was there. So it hit my creative side, because if I was just there, throwing a straight punch for 6 weeks, and that was as far as I got, and just trying to hit a target, it would be boring to me. But,
Right.
but for this, and since it was pure, it was literally coming from the book that was at the monastery. It hadn't been diluted. Nobody had looked at it and said, I'm going to change this and I'm going to change that. And all of a sudden it gets filtered through 37 people before it gets to you. And it doesn't really resemble anything what it was like originally. So I really liked the purity of it. And then, of course, associated with that, since these were monks that were doing this, there was a spiritual side to this, a philosophical side that I found very interesting and intriguing. And I just didn't stop. And I had a goal. I wanted to be, the belt system was something that was created so that Americans would, we need
Right.
we need rewards. We need
Right. We just can't do it for 20 years and learn. We have to get a trophy.
Yeah, so they had white, yellow, green, brown, black. That was it. It was just 5 belts, and then different degrees of black until you got to, I think it was the 7th or 8th year of being a black belt when you became a master. So I was actually able to make it to become a master, and it's influenced every part of my life. I mean, it's made me a lot calmer. It's made me more aware. I mean, I always looked at it as if you do this correctly, you never get into a fight because you recognize danger. You're just more aware of what's happening around you, and I found that to be really illuminating. Just the fact of being present, seeing what's around you, and knowing, and I've been in situations where it's really been important to know.
Right.
We all have, and so it's something that changed my life in the best way. And when people would ask us, they say, "Well, have you ever used it?" My instructor would always say, "I use it every day." Because that's part of it. And actually, when I received my black belt, it was the first black belt that my instructor had ever given out. And actually, Jimmy Woo, the grandmaster, came down to our studio, and I got my black belt from him. So and I did take a few classes from him and with other instructors, but I treasure not only just learning it, but also the friendships that I forged with the people, because it's amazing to be with the same group of men and women for 10, 15 plus years, see them 2-3 times a week. And it's not just going there, working out and leaving, you're forging friendships. And so I've had relationships that have lasted my entire life as a result of that. And it's not something I talk about a lot, but it's something that I'm very proud and very happy that I was able to take advantage of. And I literally every lesson I kept a diary, kept a book. I would write down each and every lesson that I got. So I would say it would be something like person throws a right punch, step out with your right foot, block with your left, step in with your left, step in with left foot turned out, right knee up to the groin. I mean, whatever it might be, just so I could kind of visualize it. So if I ever wanted to go back, I could recreate that lesson. And we did forms, and it was just great. I just adored it, loved it.
Have you done voice work for like a video game that involves a character that is martial arts based?
Yeah, there's a game called Tekken 5, and
Which character were you?
Martial law.
Man, okay, because I'm hearing your voice when you're talking about that. I'm like,
what I think in that video game, all I did was a lot of grunts. It was like, so yeah.
Yeah, there was a line he said too when he knocked you out, KO'd you. It's incredible. It seems like if I'm a video game person out there, like why wouldn't I grab some with actually the extensive background in martial arts to actually?
Well, I'll tell you why, because somebody that has extensive experience in martial arts may not be able to go They may go yeah. When they get in front of a microphone, it's interesting because the microphone, oftentimes I've seen it. You go into a studio. I used to do a lot of what they call ADR, where you would bring in a group of people and it's like, okay, see the guy on the motorcycle in that movie? He gets flipped off and he you know, smashes into that car that's coming the opposite direction. We need a sound for him as he comes off. So you got to go, make some kind of crazy thing like that. Oftentimes people will kind of go, and go, no, that's not it. You got to, I mean, come on.
Right. If you get hit by a car, you have to feel it. You have to say what's happening.
It's like, and it always makes me laugh. I remember once I was going to do some ADR on a movie. It was a World War II movie or something. And the ADR person said, "But Robert, I can't use you for this because they want people that have actually been in the armed forces." And I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "You've been in the armed forces, but listen, I've stormed the beach of Normandy in Saving Private Ryan." And I started naming all these war movies that I've been in that I've been soldiers. I've been the guy that gets shot or the guy that does whatever.
Right.
It's a different technique to be able to be free, just to be able to do the thing in front of the microphone as opposed to actually done it in real life. And we've had military advisors on set who have said, okay, in this kind of a situation, this is what you would say. You say, okay, bring the 50 cal, whatever it is. So, you just do it. You don't. But anyway, that's what being an actor is all about. You just kind of pretend.
How does your mindset change if you are, say, doing video game character or voice work for a TV show versus, okay, now you're going to see with Bradley Cooper and American Sniper, or you're in the new season of Homeland, or whatever you're doing? Is there a different prep for you mentally, physically, in terms of behind or in front of the camera?
Yeah, well, I mean, the obvious one, if you're doing something on camera, you have to memorize.
Right.
You have to memorize your lines. That's always important, and it takes a while to do. You need to really say it out loud hundreds of times to the point of where it's just completely natural. You're not really thinking about it. With on camera stuff, you have to understand that visually what's happening is very important. It's beyond just your voice. You can't hide behind that. And you're also limited somewhat in what you can portray when you're on camera. When you're doing a video game or you're doing a narration, it doesn't matter. Nobody cares what you look like. Now with American Sniper, that was a scene, even though it was written, the writer came up to me earlier in the day before we shot any of the scenes, and he said that Bradley Cooper wants to expand on this scene.
Incredible scene, by the way.
Yeah, it was really, really wonderful, and it was one of those things where it just worked out perfectly, because the first thing that you do when somebody says, "Oh, we're totally rewriting the scene, and you're going to go on in 10 minutes," is you start to panic. You go, "Oh, what am I going to do?" That's your first thing. But then he explained to me that what Bradley wanted to do was to improvise the scene, that there were elements of Chris Kyle's story that they weren't able to show in the movie. Like, for example, how long is a tour of duty? How many confirmed kills did he have versus possible kills?
Right.
Those kind of elements. So, I started talking to him. I said, okay, how long is a tour? Okay, multiply that by X number of tours. This is how number of days. This is how many days he was in country. And so when we got to do the scene, we didn't rehearse it.
Wow.
And in fact, as written at the end of the scene, I was supposed to give him a prescription of something. And we had shot the second scene first, which was where I take him to go and meet the wounded soldiers. And he goes there and starts working with them. So I knew that the story that our scene was going to lead to that. So I didn't think it would make any sense for me to give him a prescription of Valium, right? It's like, no, it doesn't make any sense. I'm encouraging him to get better on his own. I'm not going to just medicate him. So they said, well, do you want the prescription pen? I said, no, I'm not going to do that, which was kind of surprising that I would have the wherewithal to just kind of be able to make these choices, but I felt so comfortable. And by the way, I had not met Clint Eastwood or Bradley Cooper before. The first time I met them was
Huh.
your walk on the set when when Clint hires you. He doesn't meet you ahead of time. You go on videotape. He makes his selections. He did not, apparently, this is the story I heard. He did not like the audition process when he was an actor. He didn't like going into the room and doing his thing. And I guess he feels uncomfortable having actors come in, and because he wants to give every one of them the job, but he can't. So he says, you know what? I can't do that. I'll make my decisions based on what I see on the videotape. So it's nice because he chose you, but at the same time you go in there and you realize, oh, in this tiny, small little office that we've got set up, it's Clint Eastwood, Bradley Cooper, the guy working the camera, and me.
Right. Right.
Okay, how did I get into this room? Academy Award. Whoa, hello, brilliant. Okay, here I am. And I also understood, going back to the scene, what had happened prior to that the scene just before that was the scene where he almost beats the dog with his belt. I mean, it was a very dramatic, very loud, emotionally involved scene. So I thought it would be a nice segue to have something really quiet here. Don't push it, because we need a break from that. And then I also thought, okay, we've all been to therapists in life, especially if you're an actor. You've all been to freaking therapist at some point in your life. And I said, what's the worst thing that a therapist could say to you? First off. So that's when I thought, I'm going to say, your wife called. and it worked perfectly, because he did not expect that, because he knew, as an actor, and Bradley is so present. By the way, I mean, when I was working with him, Bradley Cooper had disappeared. It was Chris Kyle that was there.
Right.
He spoke with a Texas accent. He had bulked up, put on a ton of weight, muscle. His blue eyes were still there, but he was Chris Kyle. And so when I looked at him and it said, your wife called me, he knew that the jig was up. He couldn't bullshit me. He had to be honest. He couldn't hide that I knew everything. And that I think made the scene really come from a very honest, vulnerable place. And when he and I were speaking, we never stepped on anybody's lines. It was bizarre. We were just having a conversation. And I'd read Chris Kyle's book, so I was really interested, and I also had heard an interview with him, so I knew his story. I found him to be fascinating anyway. And then to be blessed to be a part of this, I thought this is I need to honor this. And so the scene went extremely well. It was actually Clint's favorite scene in the movie. It was the scene that they showed at the Academy Awards, because Bradley was nominated for an Oscar. And after I finished the scene, I was talking to the writer, and I said, you know what? I said, that scene would make a great trailer, because and it turned out to be the trailer. They used my voiceover as the trailer. It was because everything was just so, dare I say, perfect. It was just very succinct. It was simple. It was direct. It was to the point. Do you ever think you're whatever it was? I mean, are you ever afraid? I mean, whatever those words that I said were just resonated, and then they were able to put pieces of the movie in that, but overlay the voiceover, and the movie is I think brilliant. It's classic. It's great. It's one of those things that I'll always be proud to be a part of. And Bradley and Mr. Eastwood were the best, absolutely the best. When you're working with people that are at the top of their game, you just have to roll with it. If you don't fight it, you just go with it, and you just trust. And by doing that, it turned out to be, I think, a really, really wonderful experience. Even though it was intimidating ahead of time. When it was happening, it was probably the easiest thing I've ever done.
Love that. Yeah, and again, that scene is so powerful. To
Yeah,
have for you to be part of that, it's got to be pretty cool.
yeah,
And so, kind of want to segue to like the last part here. And with Ancient Aliens, there's this fan base with Alien Con, and I'm good friends with Dr. Greer, but there's people who don't like him, there's people that love Bob Lazar, they hate that guy. All these personalities in this big UFO kind of disclosure type field,
yeah.
yet the fan base is so like vibrant and so like how was that for you to like kind of be a part of that where like are you into the alien stuff or is this something where you kind of it's a job but the fans look up to you as like you're one of them. That's gotta be kind of cool.
Yeah, it's really nice. Everybody wants to, whenever we go to these conventions, everybody wants me to say, uh, I'll say it because everybody needs to hear it. Is it possible? Could it be? What if it were true? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes. So you go to these conventions and they're wearing the t-shirts that say ancient astronaut theorists say yes. That it turned into a catchphrase. And it's it's magical to be around the people. I'm very outgoing anyway. I really enjoy being with people, and I like to think that I'm humble. I mean, I if
Right.
it wasn't me doing it, it would be somebody else that's doing it. When I listen to the show, I think, yeah, it really works. I like my voice with this because it somehow it kind of gets into your brain. A lot of people have come up to me, especially women. They say, we find your voice to be very soothing. We'll put on the show, and if we're having a bad day, it kind of relaxes me and puts me to sleep, but in a good way. They always say in a good way. Um, so it's an honor to be a part of it. And you ask me whether I believe. I'm my eyes have been open to some pretty amazing experiences. I've become very good friends with Giorgio. Whenever
How is that guy? Like he looks like a mad scientist.
Giorgio is incredibly sensitive, bright, kind, smart, articulate,
Love it.
charismatic, funny people you're ever going to want to meet. He it
Love it.
this kind of caught him by surprise. Whenever we do see each other, we comment about how amazing this ride is that we're on together with the show because it started out as just one episode. I did an episode about the moon, and he was brought into it as an expert because he had worked on a different documentary that I also narrated about Indiana Jones and Crystal Skulls or something. And the producer found him to be interesting, said, "Oh, why don't we use this guy? Bring him into the show." And so they brought him in, and his character just took off. I mean, the person that he is, the whole hair thing is kind of was a mistake. Actually, it wasn't by design, but people resonate to it. So it's like, okay, now he does that. But I remember the first Alien Con that we ever went to. It caught us all by surprise that there were thousands and thousands of people that were showing up that were fans of the show, and he was treated like he was a rock star, and there was like no security. I was able to handle a little bit better because I'm saying I'm used to being around thousands of people, but it doesn't really scare me. I kind of, I kind of enjoy that a little bit. And they use me
Right.
at these conventions, kind of like the MC, the master of ceremonies, to kind of come out and introduce everyone, which is a lot of fun. But I sit in the green room and I overhear these conversations with Linda Moulton Howe and Nick Pope or Giorgio or David Childress, and it's way beyond anything
Right.
I can comprehend. But it's everybody on that show. A is an A personality. I mean, there's not a wallflower in the group, but at the same time, they're all respectful of each other, even if they get into arguments about certain things. There's respect, and they're fascinating. They're charismatic. Um, and I actually met a woman at a convention who actually worked at NASA. I ended up getting her on the show, as a matter of fact. And she told me a story about something that she was a firsthand witness to on Apollo 17, where she was literally
Oh,
in mission control. Her job was to monitor the vital signs of the astronauts that were on the moon. And so she was listening to a conversation between Ron Evans, who was the command module pilot, and mission control, where he described a UFO that followed him around the moon for 6 orbits. He said it was cigar shaped, which she said is the most common form, that and triangle shaped of a UFO, that it had acrylic markings on it, like writing, had writing on it. And Ron
wow.
Evans said, this is not American. This is not Russian. I don't know what it is. Followed him in formation for about 6 orbits around the moon and then flew off. Now, she also spoke to Ron Evans on the Ticonderoga because she was part of the debriefing crew. And she saw him in a stateroom, on this aircraft carrier. And after he landed and said, "How are you doing, Ron?" He says, goes, and she said, "Are you still thinking about the anomaly?" Because that's what they called it, an anomaly. And he says, "Yeah." Goes, "You aware of that?" And she says, "Yeah, I was part of the conversation." And he just was saying it was something he'd never experienced in his life. He didn't know what the heck it was. And this is a guy who was a former Navy fighter pilot in Vietnam. This is not a guy
Right,
that's easily rattled. So
right.
when you have, and I heard this story only by chance. She came up to me at this convention in Dallas that nobody was at, and we were just talking. She was a fan of the show, and she mentioned she worked at NASA. And I said, "Well, anything ever happened there that you haven't
Yeah,
talked about?" That she goes, "Well, the statute of limitations is so, yeah, I can talk about it." And she mentioned it, and this person is not a BSer. I mean, you know,
right.
Ron Evans took photographs of it. Those photographs have never been revealed. Um,
Jeez.
it's, and she would say that she would be at parties with astronauts from different missions, and they would be discussing things that they saw that didn't make any sense. So, do I think that something's out there? I think there's a pretty good chance. And supposedly, in 180 days, roughly, they're going to
Yeah.
release whatever they know. We'll see.
They should, when they release whatever the transcript, you should just have you read everything and
Wouldn't that
just,
be nice?
well, yeah, that'd be incredible. So before I let you go,
Yeah.
I know we have the Ancient Aliens and Oak Island doing great. You were just Seth, motion capture and voice in Last Bus Part 2.
Yep.
What other projects do you have coming up leading into the
Well,
new year once things start opening back up again?
well, we certainly have. We didn't even discuss Beyond Oak Island, which is the spinoff
Yes.
of Rick and Morty show, and that's doing incredibly well in the ratings as well. So I pretty much anticipate we're going to be doing more of those. Ancient Aliens is now in production again. We've got a very interesting few shows that are coming up. I don't want to give anything away, uh, but because they're not able, nobody's able to really travel to go to these locations. We had a
Right.
slightly different format for a few episodes at least, which I think is going to be really really interesting. It's something that I think the fans have been asking for. It's almost going to be as if Alien Con came into your house. You had a
Oh, wow.
you're right there with everybody, and there is a well, it'll be released eventually. As to
Awesome.
there's somebody that's very special that's also involved with it, that I think is going to be really great. And I think they're just starting to put those episodes together this week at the recording studio. We've got is it the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch or the Mystery? I can't remember
Yes.
the show that.
Mystery, I
Yeah,
think.
that's coming
Yeah.
up that I do the opening for, and fingers crossed. I have faith that Oak Island, they're going to be able to get back up there in March or April. We're only, goodness, I don't even think we're a third of the way through as far as recording all the episodes for this current season, because I think there's going to be somewhere around 24, 26 episodes of that, and they've got apparently some really dramatic finds that they make this year, which is surprising because everybody thought, my goodness, this show may not even make it because we can't get up there, to now they're finding really incredible stuff. Um,
Right.
and There's always something, for me. Knock on wood, I keep pretty busy, and
No,
those 3 or 4 shows are, that's almost like a full-time gig. I'm there just about every single week doing one of them or several of them.
have you ever have you ever kind of read the script of, say, an Ancient Aliens over a random soundless tape of, like, say, Oak Island or vice versa? Where I wonder if you'd be kind of like, if your fans would be like, "What?" Because when I get to those shows, flipping back and forth or going to these rabbit holes, watching 8 hours in a row, you never see the same episode twice.
Right.
And you start watching, I'm like, man, I wonder if I guess the point after hour 5 where I can watch Ancient Aliens, but here's Robert talking about Oak Island to see if I'd even recognize it.
That would be funny. No, I haven't. I know there's a couple of drinking games that are associated with Ancient Aliens that sometimes do. But I can't condone, but I can't say don't do it.
Yeah.
Say, listen,
Yeah.
you're at home, it's your business.
Yeah.
As long as you're having fun and enjoying yourself, come on. It's you could be doing a lot worse things than watching those shows, believe me. So
And then if I want to find you on social media, do you have Twitter? I know you have Twitter, Instagram,
Twitter,
anything else?
you said Rob_Clotworthy. There's Instagram, Robert Clotworthy, I think, in my Facebook page. The best one is Twitter. That's the one that I pay the most attention to, and we'll interact with the fans. Also, just so you know, I'm also on Cameo if people want a little video shout out. And there's
which I love.
There's a new site which is really cool that I just started with. It's called Jemi, Jemi. And what this is, it's kind of a marketplace. And one of the things I was able to do, normally I would only be able to do this at a convention, but I do save my personal scripts from these shows. And so
that's cool.
What I would do is I would, make it really nice. I put like a nice cover on it, and it's got my handwritten notes in there, one of a kind, and I would sell those at conventions. So now I'm able to kind of offer that to people through this site called Jemi, along with an autograph of Oak Island or Ancient Aliens or even martial law is up there.
The best.
So it's a really, really nice site. The lady that run it, she's only been doing this for a few months now, so it's still kind of in the beta phase, but I think it's really going to take off. And it's great to be able to offer some of those things that were only available in conventions. And otherwise it's like you're sending me an email and it's like I'm trying to get your address, and it's a little bit complicated. This one's a little bit easier.
Keeps it organized. I like that. Awesome. Well, I want to thank you, Robert, for this. And I wish you all continued success. And then I'll keep watching all the shows.
All right, John. Thank you so much for inviting me, and everybody, thank you very, very much. I hope I wasn't too long-winded, but I
love it.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.